Uh, our next speaker is Tom Taylor from Dragonfly Sales and Marketing. Tom is president of manages the sales efforts of independent publishers through a global network of sales organizations. Before forming Dragonfly, Tom was vice president of marketing and sales for Sage in California. Tom has been in academic publishing for 32 years, starting in 1979 as a sales representative at Addison Wesley Pearson, where he moved into positions in marketing, editorial, and sales management. In 95, Tom became a sales manager at Prentice Hall, and in 1998 was hired as executive vice president of sales and marketing at Course Technology, a Thompson Learning company, now Cengage.
Good morning. What I'm presenting is I work as an intermediary between publishers and sales agents and consortia. What I'm presenting is a case study for one of my more significant clients, Independent Scholarly Publishers Group, a group of small publishers, which I'll define in a minute. It's very similar to some of the things Jose said. There's some differences as well. First of all, I think Jose said that you need to be involved in consortia. From a monetary point of view, I would agree. Consortia, I remember Ivy Anderson of California Digital Library once showing me what the percentage of their library budget was going over a period of time to consortia versus individual subscriptions. And they got over 50% at some point. That means that the shrinking budget for individual publishers, you were at threat if you weren't involved in a consortium deal, because more and more was being eaten up by the consortium deals, and any cancellation projects they had would more or less be focused on the individual subscriptions. So, but I think there's a larger historical thing going here. I call it historical forces. I think going from print to digital 12 or 15 years ago, what is unleashed is this series of dominoes, which today can best be described as universal access. There's almost a moral mandate, much like the health mandate that in the U.S., which basically states that I think most people in the scholarly community would agree with, is that anyone in the world that needs to see scholarly research should be able to see scholarly research. Now, obviously, that mandate wasn't possible in the world of print, because you just couldn't provide research to every corner of the world with print journals. But you can with digital journals, and the model that everyone is familiar with that addresses that moral mandate is open access. That's the easy one. To see how that moral mandate leads to an open access model, although it remains to be seen whether open access actually is a sustainable business model. But another parallel model, I would argue, to open access, and one that is a kind of an organic growth out of the traditional subscription model, is a consortia licenses. And basically what's happened from print to digital is that the relationship has moved from individual journal to individual library to publisher or groups of publishers to consortia. And even subscription agents now are beginning to migrate to thinking in terms of managing consortia arrangements rather than just managing individual library arrangements. And I would argue that this is inevitable, that eventually everyone in the world that does need to see research will be able to see it, and it'll probably be a blend of open access and consortia arrangements. And you can see this is already happening in large publishers. It's hard to imagine anyone that needs to see a journal published by Elsevier in the world doesn't have access to it at this point, given the fact that Elsevier is in virtually every single consortium in the world. The reasons the small publishers, that's an important reason for small publishers to get involved in consortia deals, but there are other reasons that every publisher should. One is protection. I just mentioned that. if library budgets are moving towards consortia deals, then just to protect what you presently have, it's important to get involved in consortia deals. Once you get involved in consortia deals, what happens is you notice usage statistics explodes. That was mentioned earlier. I think David mentioned that usage goes up, and it surprises librarians, to be honest, how usage can go up with the titles that they weren't subscribing to. And with usage going up for the small publishers, it adds pricing value to your journals, adds negotiating power to you. With access and usage going up, impact factor goes up. I was at Sage before I was doing this, and we noticed impact factor and usage statistics is almost a graph that the lines were very, very, very similar. And with impact factors and usage factors and usage statistics going up, all of that adds value to your journals. The ISPEG, the case study I'm dealing with very quickly, give you a background of how this group was formed. They're all publishers on Highwire. That's what they have in common. And before I formed my group, there was a group called Task Force on Consortia and Institutional Sales that was called T-Focus that was part of Highwire. It was a group, the publishers themselves formed a group to try to figure out how they could to sell consortia around the world. And T-Focus, as ISPEG, is mainly made up of science and medicine journals. One of the things they have in common is extremely high impact factors and high ranks within their disciplines. My sales pitch, I go around the world selling their content, is I dare you, consortia and librarians, to find one collection in the world that has consistent impact factors and rankings that are as high as these. And then I have a spreadsheet that'll show that. They're all societies and non-profit publishers, so they're all smaller. Many of them only have 1 or 2 journals. I think the most is 5 journals that any of the ones have that are on ISPEG. Some publishers at Highwire have many more than that. T-Focus would have concurrent meetings at Highwire meetings twice annually and then regular conference calls. It started in 2006 with an initiative in China that Highwire was very much involved in, and I believe there were around 50 publishers in that, and that did not bear fruition. That did not work out, although many of the publishers that were part of that cite that experience with success later on in getting licenses in China. Then in 2008, 2009, there was a Hong Kong initiative that didn't work out. And then right before I formed ISPEG, there was an initiative in CALL, 2009, 2010, which is Australia and New Zealand. None of these worked out on their own. And then in the summer of 2010, I made my pitch to the T-Focus publishers, and from that, in August 2010, we formed ISPEG. And from that, from my days at Sage and actually 32 years of sales and marketing, I've come up with what I consider the 4 keys to success. These are 4 key ingredients that I would argue you can be successful without any of the 4. You cannot maximize sales without having all 4, though, if you're a small publisher. One of them, the first one, is critical mass of content. And that's the main problem for small publishers. It wasn't a problem for T-Focus, but it's the main problem for small publishers. There was an ALPS meeting a year ago following UKSG in the spring. And there were several European consortia heads there, including people from JISC, people from Denmark, from France. And every single one of them said, we will not deal with small publishers. And the reason, they said, is not that they didn't want to deal with small publishers. They don't have the staff to deal with 1,000 to get in 1,000 negotiation deals. Jose mentioned that dealing with doing a consortium negotiation can take a tremendous amount of time over a considerable amount of a lot of time, a lot of effort. That's on the publisher side. That's also on the consortium side. You'll have a consortium head here in a minute. they cannot deal with 1,000 publishers. Now, this isn't true everywhere in the world. The Chinese will have contracts with many small publishers, but in places like Europe, places like North America, it's extremely important to have a person that has the content. I think, this is where I may differ with some of my panelists, you have to have a different appropriate pricing model for each consortium. Some consortia require a maintained holdings. Some require, if you don't have any holdings, you need some other kind of pricing mechanism. So you need to be able to be flexible in your pricing. Another one is picking out the appropriate sales organization. And I say appropriate, it's not necessarily picking out what may be the sales organization that's absolutely the best. But if you're a small publisher, some of the issues involved in working with that sales organization are back office issues like billing, revenue distribution, if you're part of a larger consortium of publishers. One of the advantages of dealing with a sales organization like Sweats or like EBSCO or anyone that actually has a large back office subscription agent facility behind them is they can fulfill that back office capability where some other sales organizations may not be able to. And if you're a small publisher, that could be important because that can be extremely time consuming and thorny. Then the fourth one, which not everyone is familiar with, is what I call channel sales management. That is, you need someone who is driving the sales, representing the messaging and the interests of the small publishers through the sales organization to the customers. So if you're a large publisher, you already have someone like that. You have the head of sales. If you're and it can be an internal person. If you're some medium-sized publishers that deal with sales agents around the world, have someone internally that does that. Or you can hire someone, it can be me or it can be someone like me that works for you that works with the sales agents around the world. So I call that a channel sales manager. I'm cognizant of time. So basically, ISPEG is the same. It's a subset of T-Focus. There are 21 publishers today, 49 journals, 1 ebook series. Here are the sales agents we have. We have Impact, which is the sales arm of EBSCO for some territories. We have Sweats, Canada, Middle East and India. We have PCG, we have Charlesworth in China, and then I represent in the United States. One of the interesting things about it is we exercise participatory democracy and arriving at decisions. All 21 publishers, we try to arrive at a consensus. Not the most efficient thing in the world, but it's satisfactory, put it that way. I'll go over this real quickly. The pricing models, actually I'll skip to the next one, I think. Yeah. The two, to simplify it, maybe oversimplify it, the two main pricing models would be what Jose described, where you have the maintained holdings model. You gather the subscription holdings in a territory, and then for an access fee, they get access to the rest of the content. This is particularly important in highly penetrated markets where you already have a lot of subscriptions. So Australia, Europe, it's a model that Sweats does in Canada. You have to gather the subscription holdings and then you have holdings on top of that. If one of the values you're trying to enforce are maintaining your subscription holdings, protection, as I said in one of my opening slides, then this is an appropriate pricing model. And then if there's no significant holdings, you have to have some kind of tiered pricing or flip deal, which is just for, you come up with a price, and then for that price, the library, or in the terms of a national deal, the whole consortium gets access to all of your content. And it can be based on FTEs, it can be based on research intensities like the Carnegie classification, something like that is the model. All the consortia, all the libraries, and many of the publishers are not satisfied with either one of those, and anyone that can come up with a new model will probably be quite appreciated and would become a hero in this world. We sent out an RFP when we created this, and these are the criteria that we looked at. Once again, obviously market presence, sales capability. The ability to work with a group of independent publishers was important. We're not necessarily the easiest group to work with. That goes to cultural compatibility as well. We wanted to be able to look into their organization for transparency. I mentioned back office capability and, of course, compensation. What are we're almost here. The challenges. I mentioned we practice participatory democracy. We arrive at a consensus on all decision making. Things like, do we want to participate in this consortium deal or not? Does this deal make sense for everyone? So I sent out pricing offers, and then we try to arrive at some kind of consensus. We had a consensus on which sales agent to pick in each territory, and believe it or not, except for one negative vote in one territory, there was 100% agreement on every single sales agent that we picked for each territory. So if you discuss it, it works out. Some of the challenges, publisher confidentiality concerns. Publishers don't want other publishers to see their holdings and things like that. So you have to work around that. Back office issues are probably the thorniest ones. Those have to do with getting holdings correct. Jose mentioned that. And then also revenue distribution. They have limited resources. I have limited resources. And so that creates limited resources. And the geographical challenges. I have conference calls. I live in New Jersey. I have to set my alarm at 1:30 in the morning sometimes in order to have a conference call with China or India or someplace. It's just, that's the nature of the business. Budgetary issues, which are kind of like limited resources. None of us have a huge budget to deal with this. Here's our early successes. We have an ongoing deal with Call. I think because these take a long time, the fact that T-Focus was already involved with Call, which is Australia and New Zealand, got us ahead of that curve, that multi-year negotiation, so that that's where we're the most successful right now. Castley's in Korea. We have a deal in Korea. We have a deal with JISC in the UK, which we're quite proud of. Given their limited budgets. We just got that this year. I think we have a lot of free trials and offers out in Europe, and we have a lot of activity in China as well. Thank you very much.